The rain had passed, but its memory still lingered on every leaf and rooftop in Crestwood. The sky was washed pale, and a faint mist hovered over the lake like breath from a sleeping giant. Daniel stood barefoot on the wooden porch, feeling the damp boards under his feet. His house was quiet, too quiet. The broken flags at the end of the road flapped weakly in the wind, their red cloth torn and faded. The war had paused, not ended. He could almost hear the echo of the loudspeaker from 2 nights ago, its metallic voice still alive in his head. Vacate immediately. But now, only birds called, unaware of the battle that had just been postponed. He bent down to touch the muddy earth where tire marks had carved deep lines. Each mark was a reminder of resistance, of survival, and of what it cost. The silence was strange. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Daniel's hands were rough, scraped from repairing the gate again and again. But his eyes had changed. The fear that once haunted them had turned into something else. Resolve. He looked toward the horizon, where a pale sun tried to break through the fog, and whispered to himself, "They'll come again." Miles away, in the glass and steel fortress that was the HOA headquarters, the air was tense and sterile. The boardroom felt like a courtroom. Director Vaughn stood by the giant screen showing drone footage, Daniel standing in the rain, Marin stepping between him and the armed officers, the moment that changed everything. The footage froze, capturing Marin's outstretched hand midair, rain dripping from her uniform. Vaughn's jaw tightened. "She's finished," he said coldly. "And so is he." The board members said nothing, just nodded. One of them slid a file across the table labeled Phase 3, Reclamation Protocol. Vaughn opened it, scanning the orders. "If he wants a fight, we'll bring one," he said. "But there will be no more cameras." This time it disappears quietly. In the corner of the room, a young analyst hesitated before speaking. "Sir, there are civilians nearby, neighbors, families." Vaughn cut him off with a look that could freeze stone. "Collateral compliance," he said. "This ends before the weekend." The analyst looked down, guilt crawling up his spine. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the room. Outside, rain began again, light, steady, like the ticking of a clock counting down. Meanwhile, at the edge of Crestwood's Forest Road, a car sat still under a canopy of dripping trees. Inside, Marin gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly through the windshield. Her badge lay on the passenger seat, still wet from the storm. She had turned it over 100 times, as if looking for meaning in the engraved letters that no longer represented her. The radio beside her buzzed with static and half-clear chatter. Words like termination and clearance came through faintly. She knew what they meant. The board wasn't just planning an arrest, they were preparing an erasure. Her hands shook as she turned the key, the engine rumbling to life. "You're running out of time," she said to herself. The road to Crestwood was muddy and narrow, but she drove fast, her tires splashing through puddles, headlights cutting through the mist. As she neared Daniel's property, her pulse grew heavier. She didn't know if he would even open the gate for her again. But she had to try. Daniel was repairing the wooden fence when he saw her car appear through the fog. He froze, hammer in hand. The door opened and Marin stepped out, soaked, exhausted, but determined. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Daniel spoke quietly. "You shouldn't be here." She walked closer, boots crunching the gravel. "They're coming again," she said. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from urgency. This time it won't be a warning. "They've signed orders." "Phase 3, Daniel didn't answer right away. He wiped his hands on his jeans, then looked toward the lake where a faint mist shimmered over the surface. "Then they'll get what they came for," he said. Marin stepped closer. "You don't understand. They're not coming to negotiate. They're coming to erase everything. You, this house, your records. It'll be like you never existed." Daniel met her eyes. "That's exactly why I can't run." They went inside. The old cabin smelled of wet wood and burnt coffee. The lanterns flickered against the walls, throwing long shadows. On the table, maps of the property were spread open, marked with red ink, entry points, fences, blind spots. "You've been preparing," she said quietly. "Since the first day they came," Daniel replied. He placed an old photo on the table, his father standing beside a younger version of him, both smiling in front of the same house. "They took everything from him, too. But this house, this land, this is all that's left of us." Marin looked at him, something soft breaking through her hardened exterior. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Someone I used to be before I put on this uniform." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Then maybe it's time you take it off." The line hit her deeper than he knew. She turned away, hiding her tears. Hours passed as they worked. Daniel replaced broken boards while Marin wrote down names of nearby residents willing to help. Every hammer strike sounded like a heartbeat, steady and determined. Outside, thunder rumbled again, distant but moving closer. Marin stepped onto the porch and stared at the horizon. She saw faint lights in the far distance, not stars, but headlights. "They've started moving," she said. Daniel stood beside her, silent. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of wet soil and gasoline. Daniel looked down at his muddy boots, then back at the sky. "Then we start too," he said. He grabbed the lantern and lit a second one, placing it by the window. It wasn't just for light. It was a signal. Across the hill, faint lanterns began to appear one by one. Neighbors, allies, people who had stayed silent for too long. The night no longer belonged to the HOA, it belonged to the resistance. Inside, Marin stared at the map one last time. "They'll come for me too," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her. "Then you'll have a place here," he said. She smiled faintly. "This place doesn't forgive easily," she replied. "Neither do I." The thunder grew louder. Daniel reached for his father's old shotgun and placed it by the door, not as a threat, but as a promise. Outside, a red light blinked in the sky, a drone watching from afar. Daniel saw it, raised his chin and whispered, "Tell them I'm waiting." The screen fades to black.